Oh, yes. Pale blood. Well, you've come to the right place. Yharnam is the home of blood ministration. You need only unravel its mystery.
Whether the dreams brought on the fever or the fever brought on the dreams, Walter Gilman did not know. Behind everything crouched the brooding, festering horror of the ancient town and of the mouldy, unhallowed garret gable where he wrote and studied and wrestled with figures and formulae when he was not tossing on a meager iron bed. His ears were growing sensitive to a preternatural and intolerable degree, and he had long ago stopped the cheap mental clock whose ticking had come to seem like a thunder of artillery. At night, the subtle stirring of the black city outside, the sinister scurrying of rats in the wormy partitions, and the creaking of hidden timbers in the centuried house were enough to give him a sense of strident pandemonium. The darkness always teemed with unexplained sound, and yet he sometimes shook with fear lest the noises he heard should subside, and allow him to hear certain other, fainter noises which he suspected were lurking behind them. He was in the changeless, legend-haunted city of Arkham, with its clustering gambrel roofs that sway and sag over attics where witches hid from the king's men in the dark, olden days of the province. Nor was any spot in that city more steeped in macabre memory than the gabled room which harbored him. For it was this house and this room which had likewise harbored old Kezia Mason, whose flight from Salem Gal at the last no one was ever able to explain. That was in 1692, the gaoler had gone mad and babbled of a small, white-fanged, furry thing which scuttled out of Kezia's cell, and not even cotton mather could explain the curves and angles smeared on the grey stone walls with some red, sticky fluid.
Escucha las palabras de las brujas, los secretos escondidos en la noche. Los antiguos dioses invocamos ahora la obra de la magia oculta.
The reason we chose to introduce this video with the dreams in the witch house of Howard Phillips Lovecraft is because of its intersectionality with the topic of today's video, Bloodborne. Because the game of Hayato Miyazaki is one of cosmic horror, an artistic genre situated along the lines of horror, often associated with science fiction, we find a curious number of similarities with the work of Lovecraft regarding the establishment of FromSoftware's twisted imagery in Bloodborne. Taking roots in the real world, specifically the Victorian era, Bloodborne weaves a narrative of fantasy anchored in real events, as does Lovecraft in the dreams in the witch house. The protagonist of its short story, Walter Gilman, finds himself in the city of Arkham, an imaginary geographical occurrence in Lovecraft's work somewhere in England's Essex. There, he is confronted with a plethora of events originating from the very location he throws himself into. The witch's room he willingly rents to grasp the extent of some truth surrounding the mythos associated with a possibly haunted place. That's when the Lovecraftian horror kicks in, delivering the lesson proper to the cosmic horror genre, that mortals should never meddle with the otherworldly, for their comprehension of the occult will result in tragedy. Not only for the safety of the protagonist, but for the sake of the world, one should never cross the line of trying to use forces we know little about, in order to satisfy our curiosity or thirst for progress. For such is the lesson contained in both Bloodborne and the original Lovecraftian material, one that borrows from the metaphysical concept of the wizard apprentice born with a Goethe's poem, The Wizard Apprentice. In that poem, a young and lazy student decides to enchant a broom with a spell allowing it to accomplish its cleaning without having to actually do it. Of course, he loses control over the item, and only with the intervention of his master will he regain control of the situation. A cautionary warning: progress should be rationalized, gradual, according to the very own slow nature of human evolution. An injunction that Bloodborne builds its imaginary upon. Only in the case of the events the player will live through, the wizard apprentice has already been killed by its experimentation. Where Goethe puts a stop to the situation, Bloodborne takes it further. and in a Lovecraftian manner of presenting cosmic horror, the occult and esoteric take their toll. Humanity finds its demise in the cruel irony of getting exactly what it wants. I'm De Rouge, and I will be your nightmarish host in the celebration of the 10th anniversary of this very special video game that has us on a delicious chokehold on every sunny Revelation event. Rejoice, comrades, for once more the moon rises, and we, lore hunters, are justified in our feverish discussions and never-ending theories. May we do enough noise to beckon a sequel, and as Miyazaki once did for us 10 years ago, he shall grant us eyes once again. In this video, we will attempt to demonstrate how Bloodborne displays its story of cosmic horror by historical, sociological, and occult references, starting with what it borrows from the Victorian era to anchor the narrative into an ostensible tale of werewolves and vampires, only to surprise the player with a twist of Lovecraftian horror. Then, we shall see how from transformation to metamorphosis, Bloodborne thrives in the use of esotericism, more specifically alchemy, to gradually turn itself into a cautionary tale of witchcraft. FromSoftware has a very distinctive way of embedding storytelling into gameplay through item descriptions, the visual designs of both enemies, NPCs and localization. But in Bloodborne, such phenomenon is exacerbated by the fact that this way of proceeding is only chosen because it allows the developers to trick every perspective the gamer might originate. Both from its original concept art and the first hours of gameplay, Bloodborne brushes a distorted world of a beast-riddled city. Yharnam has succumbed to a blood disease, and you, the hunter, foreigner that for some reason decided to pay visit to the capital of blood administration, are tasked with disposing of the problem. The narrative lines are constructed through the use of the messengers, cute little bebes that deliver you, messages, and characters such as German, the old perv that tells you to use the doll as it may please you. But he also tells you to go hunt some beasts. It is what a hunter does, after all. Interestingly enough, this dialogue sheds light on a concept of obscurantism that we will go deeper in later on. What German, in a very funny pleonasm, reminds you, like you didn't heard it 1,000 times. And what does a hunter do? It hunts. Thanks, German. Where it becomes suspicious is when he tells you not to think too much about what is going on. Usually when someone tells you not to think too much about something, you should think about that thing. Bloodborne starts painting an overly convoluted narrative, even from the Souls game standards where you are generally rewarded for your observations, and very quickly, notably thanks to the wooden shield specifically, stating that defense is in this world useless, the player understands that Bloodborne sets itself apart from its soul brothers. The medieval fantasy is gone, only this bizarre and cruel world subsists. Even the pace of the fights is deadly. The game makes no apologies in teaching you that it's determined to both kill you and remain hermetic to your guesses. In that sense, it is a very Baroque piece of work. In 1976, in L'Intérieur et l'Extérieur, the Swiss literary critic Jean Rousset uses the following words to explain what is the Baroque. The idea of Baroque is one that slips through the fingers. The more we envision it, the less we understand it. If we try getting closer to these works, diversity strikes harder than similarities. If we take some distance, everything vanishes in generality. We weren't wrong in saying that the notion was both confusing and poorly delimited. If we go back to the linguistic roots of the word Baroque, borrowing from the Portuguese Baroco, used to describe a very irregular pearl with odd shapes, it is only a matter of time before we start seeing the similarities with Bloodborne. The townsfolk you meet are within their own perspective of the night of the hunt, an event that calls for barricades, isolation, and wait. They are no hunters, they make it very clear to you, and they have no intentions of getting out, nor do they intend to open their doors to you. After all, the city is indeed filled with beasts. Some of them have even taken the matter into their own hands. Weak, the first enemies you will meet, they appear to have underwent some sort of transformation. Lycanthropy? Possibly. After all, this is a game of werewolves, right? Then what the fuck is this? The characters you meet, with whom you can interact, are scarce. The doll will herself tell you that she is quite literally fabricated to help you, a sort of automaton emptied of self-will in order to serve you and provide you with affection in the world that has none to give. And German is not really helpful. The first two cases of interaction and allyship you'll be tempted to have are towards Josefka and the chapel dweller. And oh boy, are you in for a treat in how Bloodborne is about to teach you a lesson. Josefka may very well be the first interaction you have in the game. If you're not entirely shaking in your boots by how spooky Bloodborne is and decide to explore the clinic where a werewolf beats the shit out of you, you come across her at the top of the stairs where you start. Gently, she says she can't offer much assistance on the night of the hunt except giving you her blood, which in Bloodborne translates to being your friend. By gifting you with a healing item better than the blood vials you use, the game encourages you to come back and talk to her. Maybe she'll have more for you. Then, you arrive to the cathedral ward and come across the chapel dweller. The second interaction you'll have with other characters outside the hunter's dream, your hub per se, and the difference instantly strikes. Unlike Josefka, that is a well-spoken woman of science and actually gives you something, the chapel dweller is awkward in every sense of the word. Like a Bloodborne player trying to explain the lore to some random at a party. Don't worry, I've been there. When both of them ask you to send them the people you meet along your journey, promising you to keep them safe, one would be tempted to trust them to Josefka rather than to the dweller. After all, it is the choice between a doctor and a monster. The fact that their opposition goes through their appearance, even though you never really see Josefka, their game mechanics of gifting you with useful items or not, and their denomination is done on purpose by the game so you trust Josefka rather than the dweller. The fact that one possesses a name while the other doesn't is subconsciously what distinguishes friends from enemies. We fear what we don't know, and we only name what we do know. They are trying to make you suspicious of the dweller, which is quite easy since he's quite ugly. If you do trust Josefka, as the game wants you to, and go through the Forbidden Woods to find her clinic, having thought of perhaps even marrying this god-sent woman acting on behalf of a Hippocratic oath to ensure the safety of strangers, what a saint, the game punishes you for being a fool. She turns people into aliens. Back to horny jelly go. The dweller actually asks you how you're doing, which is quite polite when you come talk to him, and finds great joy in simply being around other people. Josefka just took advantage of your own stupidity and has been lying to you all along. Of course, Josefka is not really herself, for the game credits inform you that she has been replaced with an imposter, Fosefka. But still, from a game design perspective, the lesson isn't changed. More than just a convoluted twist, a Baroque elegy, this is the first grave consequence of your actions. You are responsible for having entrusted innocent souls to an apparently trustworthy Frankenstein doctor figure, and innocence in Bloodborne translates to death. Ooh, that sounds cool. The very hunters that you meet, which are Eileen the Crow, Alfred, disciple of Logarius, and Jura the Powderkeg, exist within their own narratives. The first tells you she preys on the hunters that have succumbed to bloodlust, indirectly entrusting you with the fact that not all hunters should be trusted. While the second one is the very first that offers you a real insight into the events that are unfolding in Yharnam, serving as a valuable source of information about several topics that might catch your attention as a player. Again, if one could feel some sympathy towards him, for Alfred offers a lot of lore. Once confronted with the vile bloods he tells you about, Alfred will show just how insane he actually is. Like, really insane. As for the third one, Jura, well, it's where the game expresses another master in deception. He is a pawn of a single yet powerful enough geographical narrative of slaughter, powerful enough to simultaneously reinforce the player's belief in the scourge of the beasts and consolidate the Victorian setup of the story. Because Bloodborne takes place in a Victorian setup, both borrowing from the old London architecture and also from the Industrial Revolution concepts. Such are the first visuals representation of Yharnam, a Gothic city with sharpened heights and intricate vaults, massive wooden doors forged with iron, and of course the ominous cathedrals that we come across. Also sick people coughing everywhere. Science and progress are the main ideas behind the Industrial Revolution, which are at the very core of Bloodborne and the city of Yharnam. We enter in the game's narrative through the operation of blood ministration, a clinical deed that has made the reputation of Yharnam in this world, and, as the hunter that we are, we use trick weapons. So many progressist mechanics that anchor Bloodborne in a conceptually scientific progress. Eileen uses her blades of mercy for disposing of blood-drunk hunters that succumb to a killing frenzy. Offering an agile and swift disposals of its adversaries, this weapon is tailored towards hunting men rather than beasts. It is a weapon of assassination rather than bestial predation. Jura uses the stake driver, conceived both to impale the heart of monsters, with its clear allusion to vampire legends, and hunters alike. Alfred uses the Logarius Wheel, a tragedy of a weapon for its movesets and unusefulness, showing just how mad of a lad the man actually is. We find here a reference to Berserk and the Band of Mosgos, who are also blood-driven monks that decimate those they deem heretics. But beyond serving as one's tool of hunting, trick weapon encompass the notion of technical prowess in a formidable way. We know that Yharnam is an advanced civilization thanks to its inventions. Then, we would have to question the needs of such inventions. The description of the Molotov cocktail reads as following. Explodes in raging flames when thrown against an object, one of the oldest hunter tools available in the workshop. Since the tragedy that struck old Yharnam, fire has become a staple in beast hunts and is thought to cleanse impurity. Certain types of beasts have an abnormal fear of flame. The object that is a Molotov cocktail may appear as devoid of ulterior meaning. However, since Bloodborne has an habit of keeping things away from you, you as a player must question everything it puts between your hands. Just think about Bloodborne in the same fashion you'd think about a toxic partner. Every invention answers to a need of mankind, such is the definition of technique, and perhaps apart from end spinners, we only innovate to make our lives easier. If we analyze the items that were provided to us by the game, our very own outfit, our weapons, and the amount of usable objects we find, we can only come to the conclusion that Yharnam is at war against these beasts, a raging conflict defining both its innovations and geography, as exemplified by Old Yharnam. From secluding and imprisoning an entire area behind mechanical contraptions, we unravel the first mystery of the city of Yharnam. The beast scourge originated in Old Yharnam, and it was the object of an unprecedented destruction. This world went mad enough to bombard and kill an entire town in order to contain the illness that is turning people into beasts. Instead of seeking out a cure through, let's say, blood transfusion, I don't know, it's not a game about blood, and there are no doctors in it, so they can't really do anything, the church decided to kill everyone instead of curing them. Only Jura, with his warning on the closed door of this forsaken place, the last of the powder kegs and genuinely caring person in the game, apart from you, Chapel Dweller, I love you, Chapel Dweller, he tries to make amends regarding what happened. Old Yharnam set ablaze because of the mistake that was blood ministration, and the side effect that is the transformation of its citizens into beasts, a slaughter ordered by the church and carried by the heretics of the workshop, the powder kegs. Referring to them as heretics may be a sign that even though no regrets, except those of Jura, exist regarding Old Yharnam, the deed was still publicly unacceptable. After all, we can only imagine the number of explosives and firepower that was needed to nuke an entire town. I won't make any comment on how it may or may not refer to real events. So the church, in order to maintain public order, banned the powder kegs and blamed them for all the destruction, finding perfect scapegoats in those who were the first to build their most efficient and older weapons. The role of the healing church is one that quickly appears as essential in Yharnam. You can even go as far as saying Yharnamites are theocratic, ruled by religious figures. We do encounter Father Gascoigne, Vicar Amelia, and are told by several NPCs that the church is at the center of both medical progress and public matters. An interesting parallel with our world echoes from the fact that the population seems very unaware of the events unfolding in Yharnam. They know that blood ministration heals, but they know nothing about our specific quest for pale blood. In fact, even the opinions on hunters themselves seem to vary from one character to another. We know for a fact that the church is also at the origin of the hunter's workshop, for we find an abandoned one bearing its name, older than the one we use in the hunter's dream. We are starting to see a pattern of how the church behaves toward those who help them. We mentioned it before, but a superstitious population ruled by the fear of gods may very well relate to the actual concept of obscurantism, the political decision of deliberately not educating one's people and inducing it with superstition rather than logic, often associated with the clerical institutions during the medieval period. For it allowed the justifications of inquisitions and judicial trials alike, such as hunting down women of science by referencing them as witches, or simply disposing of menacing books and objects of knowledge that could have threatened the church's power. In an adorable concrete example, obscurantism allowed the Roman Catholic Church to make people believe in geocentrism, that is, the fact that our solar system allegedly orbited around the Earth, and led to Galileo's execution. In the world of Bloodborne, the tragedy of both Old Yharnam and the Scourge of Beasts, which are directly linked to the healing church blood ministration, seem to be unknown to the inhabitants of Yharnam. At no point anyone, except Annalise, the girl boss, blames the healing church for the night of the hunt. If anything, every dialogue from Yharnamites possess some degree of worshipping and hope that the clerical institution will actually do something. Speaking of which, it is important to note that when we arrive to the cathedral ward, the church has lowered its gates. We can either buy the hunter's chief emblem to access the Grand Cathedral where Vicar Amelia resides, or defeat the blood-starved beast and go through the shortcut where the old workshop lies. At no moment is there any indication that the healing church is trying to protect its population. If anything, they are using the night of the hunt as a further opportunity to make contact with their gods. Because guess what? Imposter Józefka is part of the church. Józefka keeps on giving betrayal realness, that is. Regarding Vicar Amelia, as a boss, she seems to embody the idea of a clinging faith. Weak and zealous and barricaded in its own splendor. Sweet-looking at first, she quickly turns into a beast, a delicate veil shredding as she becomes monstrous. Her hands refusing to let go of the golden pendant, representing what is passed from vicar to vicar. The golden pendant reads as follows. Pendant of Vicar Amelia used to change into a blood gem which fortifies weapons. This pendant, passed down among the vicars who head the healing church, is a reminder of the cautionary adage. To reveal the adage, touch the altar's call. Straying further from the metaphysics of war, technical progress used in deadly fashion, and slaughter justified by religion, Bloodborne reveals its second act, a story of occultism and esoteric sciences, with the revelation of said adage that is everything but conventional for a land of science and progress, a maxim of alchemy. We are born by the blood, made men by the blood, and undone by the blood. Such are the words of Master Willem to Lawrence in the cutscene that follows you touching the scroll decorating the shrine in the cathedral. Master Willem is a part of Byrgenwerth, a college that Alfred described as the source of everything sacred in Yharnam, for in the ruins that lie beneath it resides the origin of the sacred blood. Could it be that actual studies are at the origin of any progress instead of blindness toward God? Alfred! Are you being unawarely sassy? The second act of the story is one that deviates from earthly problematics. Hemwick Charnel Lane, the Forbidden Woods, Byrgenwerth and Castle Cainhurst, the next destination of the hunter's voyage, take the plot to another level. As in, interdimensionally entwined realities and discovering other planes of existence level. Fasten your seatbelts, this is where the analysis gets spooky. Boo! If you were to be captured by the body snatcher that awaits outside the cathedral ward, a short cutscene will result in the discovery of Yharnam, the unseen village. Locked in a cell, the player awakes to a very different scenery from Yharnam, Old Yharnam, or the cathedral ward. Here, the soundtrack is almost absent, overly minimalistic, and functions in a terrific way thanks to the original theme of Hail the Nightmare. Do not listen to it at night. Moreover, the notions of movement and life, even in the hostile landscapes you encountered previously, are only represented by the body snatchers, graveyard hogs, dogs, and Goliath pigs that populate Yharnam. Unlike the frantic villagers of Yharnam constantly mumbling, are the beasts in Old Yharnam moving in all manners of ways. In Yharnam, the enemies creep upon you. Abducted, left in a cell to discover a town where the only sound that you hear is one of a sinister chant, facing creatures that gouge your eyeballs or are notoriously known for abducting people, this location is the first insight that you have into a more sinister undertone of the story. Notice how when exiting Yharnam for the first time, even if you face Dark Beast Parl, no further answers to the overall impression of malaise you have is explained. For now, the secrets of the unseen village remain to be explained. With the ambience of Yharnam in mind, proceeding through the closed door that requires a password to enter the Forbidden Woods is a narrative introduction to the occult dimension that inhabits Bloodborne. We can mention the Witch of Hemwick as the first occurrence of esoteric matters in the game. The charnel lane, a place where organs are harvested, is indeed the only one until then presenting the mechanics of summoned enemies in the form of feminine shades wielding cycles. The boss itself, with its mechanics of hiding from you and fighting with summons, accompanied by eerie music, exemplifies the beginning of a new dawn in the game. Far from a Victorian lycanthropy game, Bloodborne anchors itself in a more profound mystery. Perhaps we can talk about Byrgenwerth and the entirety of the second act of Bloodborne, up until the defeat Rome, as one of occultism and esoteric sciences. Still grounded in historical concepts, but less terrestrials than mere technological advancements, occultist science share contemporaneity with the Industrial Revolution and Victorian era. Traced back to 1881 in its first use as an English term, the art of occultism encompasses the sciences of the energies that lie deep within reality. From the Latin occultus, it means what it is unseen, the sciences of what fails to be grasped by academic paradigms. Supposedly, again, don't go around claiming I'm trying to make you believe witchcraft is the way to succeed in your final exams. If anything, it may help you open a mildly interesting TikTok account. However, for our analysis of Bloodborne, understanding the mechanisms of said sciences is essential. In the occult sciences, we find the fields of spiritism, the discipline of making contact with unearthly beings, and alchemy, the mechanical studies of fluids, objects, and the art of their transformation. Alchemy has always been by your side from the very beginning of the game, because of the quicksilver bullets. Enhanced by the fact that you can recharge them by extracting your own blood, they are nothing more than mercury, quicksilver being the alchemical denomination of mercury. To add to the presence of alchemy in Bloodborne, blood ministration and the overall elixirs that you find in the game may be indicative of the goal that drives all alchemists, the creation of the philosophical stone through transmutation. In alchemy, the philosophical stone is said to have three properties: to turn materials into silver and gold, free the human body from its physical and intellectual boundaries, and heal diseases. Do you see any similarity with the game? Do you wish you had the philosophical stone in order to cure your ex from being stupid? To achieve this, three essences are to be conjoined: the nigredo, associated with putrefaction and the color black, darkness in Latin; the albedo, associated with purification, signifying whiteness in Latin; and finally the rubedo, associated with blood and fire, meaning red in Latin. The process of those three transformations are cohesive with what happens in Bloodborne. First, in order to acquire the Nigredo, you need to take all the ingredients and make them boil into a dark mass. Metaphorically, it represents death and decay, total obliteration of matter into nothingness. Remember Yargul, the occult village? Yeah, that's what they are trying to do. Notice how the one reborn is created from whatever that black ooze thing is. Certainly not candy. I mean, Mikolash doesn't really have a face that translates I like to eat candy during my profane rituals, but who knows? You know what? Maybe it does. Maybe it does. I don't know. I'm lost here. No. Regarding the albedo associated with the purification of darkness, linked to the procedure of distillation and the rebirth of what is dead, often associated with the planet Venus for the light it sheds on Earth, one could theorize that the very own hunter works as the albedo of the story. When you think about it, our blood allows us to gain quicksilver bullets, and Queen Annalise, the girl boss again, even describes us as moon-scented, among other NPCs such as Ariana. She will point out the uniqueness of our character scent. It could also be because we are sweating balls after trying to defeat Logarius with a Tonitrus when the only thing he does is cast spells like a little bitch.
Oh my, what a queer scent.
Oh! What you said? Queen.
The moon in Bloodborne is essential. It acts as a surrogate to the sun in a game where it is non-existent. That fact may seem mundane, but from a world design perspective it bears its own significant importance. From a metaphorical and symbolic perspective, the moon is associated with the tides, liquids, and because of its affiliation with femininity, menstrual blood, but also the goddess Hecate and witchcraft. I don't think that, apart from its blood implications, witchcraft is what is trying to be conveyed by the moon in Bloodborne. But, from an esoteric point of view, we may appeal to its representation in the Marseille Tarot. In case you haven't guessed it yet, I am French, and before you joke about it, oui baguette. Here, it is done. We can proceed. Appearing in the Marseille Tarot for what it is, a satellite that reveals itself once the sun descends, the moon signifies the secrets that are hidden, truths camouflaged in plain sight. From there, it is either beneficial or overly damning to the one pulling its card, for what you learn may either strengthen your knowledge or destroy you. Of course, an argument could be made that the albedo in Bloodborne could also be a unique blood type, because the ones that offer you their blood all have very interesting fates in the story. Adela, for her nature as a blood saint, as stated in a blood vial's description, already possesses some special quality, whereas both Iosefka and Ariana will give birth to infant great ones. Yeah, the story is great for women. Oh, but for men too, don't worry. Everyone dies equally here. It wouldn't be too far-fetched to claim that some humans in Bloodborne possess a je ne sais quoi, a touch of albedo that makes them part of both higher plays of gods and terrestrial rituals alike. With the first two primordial alchemical ingredients in mind, the third one, the rubedo, what is red and results from the sublimation of the albedo by fire, could be quickly tied to blood in Bloodborne. Such a possibility could make sense if it wasn't so literal, and literal interpretations have always failed in Bloodborne. Secondly, if an important part of the game wasn't how one must gain eyes in order to elevate its spirit, signified by the gameplay choice of the insight reference to the player, but also by the huge amount of both enemies and objects that make use of eyes in their design. The nature of the rubedo, the refined state and ultimate metamorphosis of matter, is the growth of eyes on the inside. In alchemy, traditionally, it is the rise of the spirit to a higher plane of consciousness. Like those hippies tripping balls at the front row of some Parisian nightclub. The triumph of mind is quite literal in Bloodborne, in the sense that eyes are implanted in one's brain, allowing our minds to literally see. Byrgenwerth is the place where Master Willem once had an epiphany, one that states that evolution without courage will be the ruin of our race, the very cradle of the first transformation, the original alchemy of matter, a human body turned into a great old one. Rom, the vacuous spider, former student turned into something transcending mankind. Both Master Willem and the choir share the particularity of blindfolding themselves. Specifically, the cap of the choir set states the following: attire of the choir, high-ranking members of the healing church. Them again. Members of the choir are both the highest-ranking clerics of the healing church and scholars who continue the work that began at Byrgenwerth. The eye covering indicates their debt to the teachings of Master Willem, even though their paths diverged. Here, the debt to the teachings of Master Willem are very likely to be the fact that one must lose its deceptive ability to see, for the world in Bloodborne possesses numerous secrets that we, humans, are blind to see, and so we should gain eyes on the inside. Mikolash even begs Kos to grant him eyes like he once did for Rom. What may appear to be a prayer or an epiphany could also be perceived as the quest for the elevation of the spirit, the quest for the rubedo. If we think about it, Mikolash, host of the nightmares and head figure of the School of Menses, in his supplication towards Kos during our boss fight, hints towards the fact that not only has he not yet accomplished his design, but also that he has chosen to divest himself of his very own body to look, witness and live within the nightmare. To become a host for the nightmare and hope for some transformation to occur, some transmutation of the body, or, in other words, an alchemy. The nature of the occult and esoteric arts in Bloodborne is intimately linked to the theme of mankind meddling with forces that go far beyond its control. The examples we have quoted here being German and Mikolash having committed grave mistakes in summoning Great Old One. The former is trapped endlessly in a dream he can't awake from, and the last has precipitated the souls of its followers into an incomprehensible nightmare. Whatever alchemy or transcendency they were seeking, they failed, for Bloodborne isn't the interpretation of some alchemic rites. It is, still, in the end, a story of cosmic horror and of the impossibility of mankind to face superior powers. As such, it is very plausible that impostor Josefka was chosen by Erden, the formless Great One, to become a mother to a surrogate of a lost infant. We talked about it earlier, but it is also the destiny that Ariana will know. If you come back to her after sending her to the Erden's chapel, once you defeat Mikolash, she will be in the sewers, an infant Great One crawling next to her. Now you know you can give birth to an alien god and live through it, ladies. Bloodborne is a tale of cunning lies, deep mysteries, but above all of horrible truths. One of them being that the feminine figures of this story end up losing all control of their own bodies. By the will of greater forces, and with the end of Rom, keeper of the illusion, the night robs these women of agency. Unwillingly, they are victims of a virginal pregnancy in a cosmic disaster, and the occurrence is nothing new, for Queen Yharnam, that we see after defeating Rom and before entering Mergo's wet nurse boss Arena, also has been the bearer of an infant Great One. The blood that heavily contrasts with a white gown indicates a difficult, possibly deadly childbirth. She whips and guides you through the game towards a formless child, Mergo, a Great Old One, for you to end its suffering. For Bloodborne is indeed a fable of blood, blood in the sense that it expresses the never-ending cycle of violence that operates towards every instance of its story. Be it men predating on men, men hunting gods, or gods imposing their will to men. In this narrative, no one is safe, and in the end, the answer to the question that every video game imposes upon its player reveals itself. What do we do as a hero? What do we accomplish? In Bloodborne, nothing. You have three options. You either choose to let German kill you, and as a result are reborn to relive another night of the hunt, even if the gentle words of the doll to your grave, wishing you to find peace in the waking world, are very sweet. They are short-lived, for violence and bloodshed never stop long in Yharnam. You can also choose to defeat German without consuming 3 umbilical cords. You refuse to submit him your life, kill him, only to discover that the entity responsible for the hunter's dream takes you as a hostage. From a blood moon descends the moon presence to rapture you. You replace German as a surrogate for the never-ending dream. The hunter becomes the mean thanks to whom the moon presence can continue to cast its radiance. Finally, you can defeat the moon presence by consuming the cord, but even if you do so, it is only to witness yourself as having been reborn as a great one. Such ending seems like the epitome of everything the world of Bloodborne was craving, the perfect alchemy accomplished, and the metaphorical philosopher's stone acquired. The hunter transcending and shedding its humanity only to become part of what initially started the night of the hunt, a god. Numerous discussions have been made about good or bad endings in Bloodborne. Personally, I think it is more about the metaphysical message they bear and how they resonate within you. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche says the following, that mankind is a rope fastened between animal and overman, a rope over an abyss. This quote synthesizes every storyline ongoing in Bloodborne, the mortal eager for evolution, that goes as far as abandoning traditional technical progress in order to offer humanity to higher forces. Ultimately, Bloodborne is a tale about fear, motivated by either ignorance or hatred, in which every gameplay string and design choice is made to position its player in such a manner that he has no other choice but to succumb to those feelings, fearing the diseases that are nothing but a natural part of the cycle of life and death. The Healing Church calls upon the scourge of the beasts in Yharnam, a far worse fate than any illness that one might contract. By hating on their mortality as expressed by their jealousy towards the great old ones and their knowledge, both the School of Menses and the Choir shed their humanity in order to aspire to a grand revelation, only to be met with tragical demises. Left alone, ignored and is adage forgotten in the ongoing chaos, Master Willem, who symbolizes the rational and cautious use of philosophy in realms of research, offers a sad view in this decrepit state. Mankind has turned its back on reason, and as such, there is no salvation for those who relish in a desperate race towards the unknown. In the end, everything that has been said here is not to be taken too seriously, for they are only the mumblings of a mad lore hunter that for a decade has lived in the swirls of Bloodborne's dreams and nightmares. This is a suggestion towards the bibliography of lore that exists within our community. The DLC, The Hold Hunters, and its revelations is yet to be treated, but perhaps if you wanted to, it may be the topic of a next video, for it offers the opportunity to go back to some topics I left on a superficial level. Thank you for watching, and may you be reminded that this anniversary is also yours, good hunter. If 10 years later you're still as excited for Bloodborne news, then you came a long way, and perseverance is a trait that any dandy should take pride in. Bisous de rouge.